All right, good evening. This is Chair Justin Cooley, and I would like to call this regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, thank you. Would Deputy City Clerk Megan Wilbanks please call roll?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Commissioner Flores is going to be absent tonight. Commissioner Jorgensen?
Here.
Commissioner Khan?
Here.
Commissioner Munoz Morris?
Here.
Commissioner Tolley?
Here.
Vice Chair Houghton?
Here.
Chair Cooley?
Here. All right, that brings us to public comment for items not on the agenda. At this time, we will hear any public comment for items not on tonight's agenda. Items raised are generally referred to staff, and if action by the commission is necessary, may be scheduled for a future meeting. City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
I have received one comment card, but it is for the public hearing item tonight, so we'll hold on to that. I did want to bring the attendees' attention to our new integrated timer. It's at the top of the screen. Sorry. It should show in just a minute. Anyways, when we start the time, the big green bar at the top will be green, and as it counts down, it'll change colors to indicate how much time you have left. If you run out of time, we'll hit a bell. That will be your signal to stop your comments. And if you haven't done so already, we've got public comment speaker cards up here that you can fill out and turn in to us. So just help us call your name in the order that we receive it. So no comments for non-agenda items.
All right, thank you. So that takes us to the consent portion of the agenda, and the only item on consent is consideration of our minutes from the September 25th, 2024 Planning Commission meeting. Before I call for a vote, do any commissioners have any comments on the consent item? Okay, no one's coming forward here. Do I have a motion and a second to approve consent?
I will move to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. I'll second.
All right, all in favor say aye. 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 All opposed say no. All right, that brings us to item 4, our public hearing. Any court challenge to the action taken on public hearing items on this agenda may be limited to considering only those issues raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And item 4A, the public hearing item before us, is to re-review an existing conditional use permit for a fraternity located at 280 California Boulevard. Would Associate Planner Hannah Hahn please present the report?
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Hannah Hahn, and I'll be presenting on tonight's hearing item. To provide context on this use permit, Alpha Epsilon Pi, or AEPi as their acronym, obtained a use permit for the fraternity in 1983. This approval allowed for up to 19 residents and various site improvements in order to facilitate the use at 280 California. Due to repeat noise violations in 2023 and 2024, the CUP is brought back to the Planning Commission for a re-review. This re-review is documented as a new application number as use-0625-2024. As noted in Condition 5 of the original approval, a re-review is required upon receipt of a complaint. Any re-reviews may result in added, modified, and or removed conditions or revocation of the use permit. At this time, staff recommends updating the CUP with revised findings and conditions for compliance with current municipal code regulations, as well as consistency with conditions in recent approvals for other fraternities. Provided here is a vicinity map of the fraternity. 280 California is located in the R4 zone and is located adjacent to the R2 zone to the immediate east of the site. The property is developed with a 10-bedroom residence along with various site improvements. It is an irregularly shaped lot that takes access from California and is in proximity to other fraternities, single-family and multifamily residences, a convenience store, and Cal Poly campus. As part of the re-review, staff has evaluated the CUP for compliance with the current regulations. Since the approval of the original use permit in 1983, there have been a number of changes to the municipal code, which include updated findings for the use permit and fraternity approvals. These findings require compatibility with nearby uses and serve as a basis for the recommended conditions as revised. In addition to these updated requirements for approval, standard conditions for fraternities were also established as part of the comprehensive update to the zoning regulations in 2018. These conditions limit the number of permitted residents, regulate the number of attendees for regular meetings and gatherings, require affiliation and good standing with Cal Poly, and also establish a responsible contact for the fraternity. As such, AEPI has been conditioned for compliance with these regulations. Aside from the Title 17 updates, there have also been updates to Title 9 since 1983. These code requirements address noise, public disturbances, and other disorderly conduct, and would apply to any use regardless of a use permit approval. The key chapters that apply to fraternities are identified on the slide here. These include prohibited noise-generating activities and unruly gatherings to protect the public peace. There are also enhanced penalties if these provisions are violated during specific times of the year, such as Move-In Week at Cal Poly and holidays such as St. Patrick's Day and Halloween. After accounting for the changes in the municipal code, the revised conditions listed here on the slide are recommended to address the recent noise violations. To address concerns related to noise and large gatherings, these conditions would establish clear thresholds for re-review, regulate the number of people gathered on a property, and require adherence to stricter standards in the city's noise ordinance. In addition, the fraternity would also be required to establish and maintain communication with its neighbors. As proposed, these conditions read very similarly to the conditions of another fraternity CUP that council had approved last month. In addition, as part of the re-review, many of the conditions in the original approval that relate to continued fraternity activities, such as required parking spaces, property maintenance thresholds for review and such, have been reorganized and incorporated as conditions with some updated language. As part of this re-review, staff has also, in order to provide a list of relevant conditions, removed any conditions from the prior approval that have been satisfied, such as those that required immediate property improvements or no longer required, such as the street yard setback exception. As proposed, staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopt the draft resolution approving the modifications to the existing use permit to allow continuation of their fraternity at 280 California. As mentioned in the previous slides, these modifications would include the updated required findings as well as revised conditions of approval to ensure that the fraternity would continue in a manner that's compatible with existing and proposed uses in the vicinity. This concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions. I also just wanted to make note that the fraternity president is also available in the audience as well.
All right, thank you very much. And before we get to questions, I meant to ask, do any commissioners have any disclosures, ex parte or otherwise to?
I visited the site today, both on Hathaway and on California.
Okay.
I also visited the site coming in on California and encountered some of the residents there and just identified myself. We didn't get into any topics, but that was it, just looked around.
Okay. All right, thank you for the presentation. Do any commissioners have questions for staff at this time? Go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the presentation. Couple of questions. I wanted to maybe learn a little more about the process for review, modification, and/or revocation of these CUP. So I remember reading that if they have 3 in a year, in a 12-month period, it triggers a review by the commission essentially, right?
Yes, that's correct.
What are the steps beyond that, or what are the precedents for the city before this case for actually revoking a CUP for a fraternity or a similar use?
Based on my experience so far, I haven't had an instance where we have recommended revocation of a fraternity use permit. I don't know if, Tyler, you had anything else to add?
I mean, this is the first time I've seen a re-review of a fraternity use permit in my almost 24-year career here.
Okay. All right. I'm assuming there's some sort of compounding, what I want to say, implications for repeated violations, and then the same side, is that the case? Like, if they have so many violations, the fees increase, or they're exposed to other legal actions as well, or I guess the landowner is?
Yes. So for code enforcement, if there are repeat violations, I forget what the time frame is, but the fees do escalate.
Okay, gotcha. And then lastly, because I know there's other discussion to be had, but oh man, I just had it. Give me 1 second. I remember. There was also, I forget, I'm not going to be able to cite the municipal code, but there was a code that basically said with this revision, we're also in line with the city's code to keep fraternities near campus, and there's some other language in there. Is that a requirement of the city? Are we required to allow fraternity activity within city limits, or is that something that's discretionary for the city to review and decide?
Yes, so that would be a discretionary review.
Okay.
So there are goals in our land use element and the housing element that identify fraternities as a use that we would anticipate since we are next to Cal Poly campus. And the zones in which they're identified as appropriate are the R3 and the R4.
Okay, so it's not so much that we must allow them, it's that if we allow them, we should aim to allow them in these areas. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
I have 2 comments. In reviewing the proposed ordinance, I guess it's a resolution, on condition 13, it talks about bicycle parking. It says the fraternity shall install a minimum of 19 bicycle spaces, 1 bed per each residence. So I think that word should be 1 space for each residence. A grammatical check there. And then the second question, not related to the noise comments, during my site visit, and noticed that in the parking area there were considerable number of garbage bins, recycle and garbage, and it just seems to me, being a public works person, it'd be better to have a dumpster and a dumpster container and, just dump there. So I don't quite understand why they have so many containers everywhere. Seems to impede their parking, and it's kind of unsightly. So that's just a general comment. I don't know if we have any pull on that or not, but anyway, those are my 2 comments.
Go ahead.
Okay, technical question. The original 1983 document was a use permit. Now we're talking about conditional use permits. Is it the same thing, just a terminology change?
Yes, so before the terminology was use permit, and so that at that time required planning commission review. And then we had a different term for administrative use permit, which was at a staff level. Over time, the terminology has evolved.
Okay,
and so
good enough.
Very similar.
Okay, thanks. And then Commissioner Munoz-Morris, page 33, I think, addresses what you were talking about with the escalating. There's actually 3 fines that are levied right there, and the first one's $50, the next one's $100, the next one's $200, total due $350. And I had a question about, we can get into some of that later, but are we at 3 documented violations of the noise ordinance in the last 12 months? Because some of the letters from neighbors talked about more than that. Or is it 4, or is it 6, or how many is it? Do we have a real clear count?
I can verify the
Okay.
count right now based on pulling up some logs from police department.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that takes a little research, that's okay. And then I have a question. What happens if we choose to revoke this use permit? What happens to the fraternity? And do we know what that spells? Do they have to move out? Does it have to disband? Does it cease to exist? Do they reapply? Do we know? Is this uncharted territory, or what actually happens?
So this would be a new occurrence if we do move to revoke a fraternity use permit. As Tyler has mentioned, we haven't seen this in the last few decades. If, let's say, a use permit is revoked, they technically are not allowed to operate as a fraternity. What we would mean by fraternity is that, they are an organization and they host events for their organization. So technically, the members can still live there, but they can no longer have events for their fraternity at this location.
Okay.
And I would add that all the municipal code kind of rules and regulations would still apply. It doesn't really matter whether they're fraternity, recognized through a use permit or not. I mean, there's the noise ordinance, there's the unruly gathering ordinance, there's many other requirements that would still apply regardless of their affiliation.
Okay, thanks. I have other questions, but I think they'll relate more to public comment. So as far as the staff presentation, that's it for me right now. Thanks.
Actually, I had a question really quick about the recommended conditions. Are they purely a result of updated community guidelines, or any of the recommended conditions specific to this location?
Yes, so for most of the recommended conditions, they do read quite standard for any use permit approval, specifically in the first few. And then there are some standard conditions that are specific to fraternities. And there are a few conditions that look and read very similarly to the last time that we had brought a different CUP for a different fraternity that required extended quiet hours, communication with neighbors, and also some clarification on like amplified noise. So those were included in as I would say relatively new conditions within the last 6 months. Since then, they were refined a little bit more during the latest council review last month.
Okay, so that was going to get it to the process where, how were those derived? Are they just best practices? Or are they a result of, interactions with neighbors? Or if you could just speak to the process.
I would say they're mostly reflective of public comment that we received.
I had one more question. It might just be more of a prompt for when some of the members speak, but the recommendations, we're talking about 19 residents, which I'm assuming it has to do with the capacity of the dwelling itself, but no more than 25 members gathering for any one event. Is that in line with their roster of active members, or how many members do they have compared to that number, 25? Is it in line with that? Do we know?
Yeah, so I can clarify for the 19 residents. That is based on the number of bedrooms and anticipated count of members when this fraternity was first evaluated in 1983. And so it allows for, a number between 0 and 19 members to reside at this location. In terms of the current number, I'm not exactly sure what that count is, so I'll defer to the fraternity president to provide you with that information. And in terms of the 25 people capacity for routine gatherings and meetings, that's based on some past practice that we've done. That's based on the average population density, and it's a calculation of the average population density with how large the lot is.
Okay, that's kind of what I was saying. The residency, the resident numbers, I understand that fluctuates, but if we're limiting their gatherings to 25 and they have, say, 40 active members, then I can see an issue there, I guess, because we're essentially handicapping them as far as where they can meet as an organization, right? So I guess that's what I was wondering, where that 25 number came from. Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Following up on Chair Cooley's question about the conditions, just to get really specific about that, the conditions that are proposed, would you find those in the draft resolution starting on page 19, section 3? And we've got 1, 2, 3 up through 13 or maybe 14 with the indemnification. That's the proposed conditions for if we were to approve with the conditions that you've suggested, that's it right there. And if we want to mess around with them or add to them, then that's where we would focus our efforts. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
All right, any other questions for staff at this time? All right. We have time reserved for an applicant presentation. I'm assuming in this instance, the fraternity would be considered the applicant. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Does the applicant or a representative of the applicant wish to make a presentation?
Okay. That's Chaim Hale.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Adam Wexler. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak here today in front of you all. I'm here representing Alpha Epsilon Pi, our fraternity, and 280 California Boulevard, the residence where some of our members reside. For a little context of the organization that I represent, Alpha Epsilon Pi is an organization that has a little over 100 members at this time. We are a Jewish fraternity dedicated to building strong leaders and fostering a strong community. And some of our core values that we are driven by include humility, perseverance, faith, honesty, and mutual helpfulness. As a chapter in spring quarter of 2024, we had the third highest ranking GPA out of Cal Poly's Interfraternity Council, and we accumulated over 400 hours of community service, not including the philanthropy events that our chapter has put on and hosted. I myself was a resident at 280 California Boulevard this last year, and I'm also serving as our chapter's fraternity president, and I've been serving since January of 2024. I'm here to apologize today and to let you know that those past noise complaints and violations that we've received in the last year are not indicative of our values, and we would like to take full accountability. In the past, we've shown disregard for maintaining a quality neighborhood by being disruptive neighbors. We understand that, and we take full accountability of our past actions and the violations of our conditional use permit that have occurred. As we've moved into this new academic year, both the new residents at 280 California, myself, our chapter, and our chapter leadership have made a serious effort to build on what we consider to be a successful start to this new year. To start fall quarter, we have received no noise violations or complaints, and we are looking to keep it this way as well. I would like to also highlight some of our efforts made by our house and our chapter, both philanthropic and community-oriented alike, while I have the time. On the philanthropy side, I want to make note of our efforts that our chapter has made back to give to local charities and the community. 280 California has been the host to a new annual philanthropic event that our chapter has put on called AE Pumpkins, where the members of our chapter sell and carve pumpkins with neighboring residents, as well as Cal Poly students. Last fall, 2023, we raised over $1,000, and we donated that entire sum to Lumina Alliance, which is an organization that supports domestic abuse survivors and sexual assault survivors alike. And this year, fall of 2024, we donated the sum of money that we were able to raise to United Hatzalah, which is a volunteer, nonprofit-based organization that provides free emergency medical services to those in need in Israel. In the winter of this year, we also raised $1,000, and we gave that sum of money, half of it to Lumina Alliance, and the other half to the Sophia Padawan Fund through hosting a Pi Pi event on Dexter Lawn. This last spring, we organized a philanthropy that was held on our campus Dexter Lawn as well. There, we managed to collect around 207 bone marrow swabs for the Bone Marrow Registry for the National Marrow Donor Program, or NMDP. As a result of our efforts, we were actually able to find a match for a patient in need, allowing a Cal Poly student to save a life and give the patient the opportunity for new beginnings. Just this past Sunday, our organization hosted an Avila Beach cleanup, demonstrating another example of how we look forward to the opportunity to continue to work with these organizations and local communities alike. As a nationally Jewish organization, our chapter has made continued efforts to be a part of and support the Cal Poly Jewish community. Whether it be by attending weekly Shabbat or the weekly day of rest and worship at the Chabad House, hosting Abdallah, which is the concluding of the Sabbath at our house, which is an event that we typically do conjoined with Hillel, another Jewish organization on our campus at 280 California Boulevard. We have made those efforts to support and give back to our local religious and Jewish community, religious and local communities alike. Excuse me. As I mentioned before, we have been lackluster in maintaining a quality neighborhood and for being neighborly. We have made a serious effort to build those relationships with our surrounding neighbors, specifically with Lee Arms apartment complex, whom we have not had the greatest of relationships with in the past. And as we continue throughout the rest of the year, we plan on continuing to foster and develop those relationships, and we want to build on those positive efforts that we have made thus far. This year, we have taken measures such as inviting Christine Wallace, who, if you're not familiar, is San Luis Obispo Police Department's neighborhood outreach manager, to one of our weekly chapter meetings in order to educate our members and familiarize themselves with SLO County's municipal code as well as with SLO PD. We've expanded the role of our chapter's risk manager position, which is an executive board position, to now be a neighbor liaison as well, making sure that before any events are conducted, they reach out to surrounding nearby neighbors. We've familiarized our new tenants with the contents and importance of our conditional use permit and will continue to do so as future tenants continue to live at 280 California Boulevard. With the city's support, we hope to arrange orientation meetings at the start of each academic year, inviting representatives from code enforcement to speak with our residents and chapter leadership about their responsibilities and the importance of maintaining a respectful neighborhood environment. We believe that this will provide clarity and reinforce expectations from day one. Our chapters made mistakes, and I'm here to say that we are sorry for them. We can't change our past behavior or the disruption that we have caused in the local community, but we are committed to educating current and future residents on the importance of adhering to our conditional use permit and being considerate tenants. We will continue to build upon and establish those relationships that we have developed with our neighbors and continue to check in and ask for feedback from any nearby residents. Thank you again for your time. I'm eager to look, and I'm looking forward to working collaboratively with you all, with the commission, as well as the community, to foster a respectful and engaged neighborhood. And if you guys have any questions for me, feel free to ask.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
I guess just my one question, and you kind of addressed it already. You said you have about 100 members, active members currently, is that correct?
Yes, 101 members currently.
Okay, so what are your thoughts about the limitation of maximum of 25 people per any gathering or event at 280 California?
Well, I think,
Is it feasible? Is it attainable for you all?
I'll say that when we do host, typically the main meetings that we're hosting regularly are chapter meetings, and those chapter meetings are typically held on campus. But I do think that the 25 number limit is a little difficult, considering like half of our members that live at the house, half of our tenants, they are in relationships and they have friends and they have study groups that they do host. So I think in terms of that 25 set limit number, it could be kind of difficult at times, but typically like the main meetings that we're holding are on campus. So we're able to utilize that capacity that we have available.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's good to know. All right, thanks.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we've heard about chapter meetings. I'll just ask, how often do you have parties?
Great question.
That was not my question, but, and how does that work? And is there advance notice do you get a special event permit, which is what's required above 25 people? Do you have live or amplified music going on? So tell us about your party situation.
Yeah, well, two great questions. I'll go to say that in the past, we have not been the best about informing our neighbors and residents that live nearby about events that we are hosting that are social oriented. Typically, yes, there is music that is being played, no live music or bands of any kind that at least we've employed. When we do host a social event, we have strict guidelines that we follow in accordance with Cal Poly's risk management plan, as well as our own, to maximize safety within the house for our guests, for our members. And is there anything else along those lines?
How often do parties happen?
How often? Yeah, that's great. Yeah, again, so last year with all those noise violations and complaints that we received, you can assume that we held a decent amount of events and a decent amount of parties. I think this year we have not hosted a single event, major event, that is, the ones that we typically have registered with the school, and the ones that have received those typical ones that fall in line with the ones that receive violations and complaints. I think as a chapter, we're in a unique kind of position where typically other organizations and fraternities on our campus have access to, different housing options. And typically our house, our main 280 California house, is our main source of housing for both our members. And it's also, in location where those kind of social events occur. So typically when those events do happen, they're always at that house as well. Yeah.
And what's on the calendar to come for the rest of the year for parties?
Week by week basis.
Okay, so you have, maybe they're planned or maybe they just
Yeah.
come along or.
Typically, those we set tentative social schedules, and those get updated as the quarter goes along. And if something comes up that interferes with anything along those social schedules, or we need to take something off the list for whatever reason, we take it down. Same with any other events that we have.
Parties, it's week 8 right now, Cal
Yeah.
Poly. You haven't had any parties this fall yet?
Not registered with the school, no. And in that sense, I mean, none that we, no major events typical to the ones that we've had in the past.
Okay.
I want to follow up on the question from Mr. Munoz-Morris about the 25 limit.
Yeah.
And you sort of bristled at that. So I'm just going to ask you, in your opinion, is 280 California a large enough facility for your organization?
Is it like in terms of when we are hosting like
Yes.
chapter meetings?
In your opinion, is it a large enough organization to conduct the events that you seem to want to carry on?
Absolutely. I think 280 California has been a home and a staple of our organization. It provides, it's Alpha Epsilon Pi's home, and I think 280 California has provided us safety and comfort and allows us to operate freely and to the best of our ability.
Hello. Have you ever applied for or been issued a special events permit with the city for parties or gatherings?
No, we have not applied for one of those.
Okay. This question's for staff. So what's involved with applying for a special event permit, and what are the stipulations that come with that?
Oh, yes. So to clarify, for special event permits, it's about a 30-day review for staff. We would require a site plan of sorts with a brief description of, the type of event that they're looking to host, how many people are involved, the anticipated dates, times, and so forth. And, what type of activities it is that they're looking to have on site as well. And then from there, the review may continue, or it may be conditioned a certain way depending on, anticipated impacts.
Okay, so special event permits can incorporate past 10 p.m. noise events, gatherings, things like that. It's the special event permit that can supersede the noise ordinance, or no?
Based on how the conditions are drafted, any requested exceptions from the noise ordinance wouldn't be approved.
Okay, so I'm just trying to theoretically come up with an idea for them. So if they got a special events permit that they were planning to host a chapter party, for example, till 1 a.m., is that permittable?
It may depend on how they're hosting the event.
Okay.
It's not necessarily like the number of people that's taken into consideration as well.
Okay.
But also, are they looking to have noise, outdoor noise? Can it be designed in a way where it's more internal? Questions like that we would look into.
So can they get a special events permit to host parties?
As they really occur.
Yeah,
I think there's a difference between can they host an event and can they host an event that violates the noise ordinance, because I think the language that we have in there says they can theoretically host a party till 1, but after 10 they'll still get hit with a noise violation if they exceed it.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah.
Is the special events permit some type of a bridge that can bridge that special event for? Okay, so regardless of a special event, they still have to adhere to a 10 p.m. quiet time. Okay.
Yes.
Just ask that another way. There are no permits that would provide exceptions to these recommended conditions, correct?
No exceptions to the noise standards. Yes.
Okay.
But you could have more than 25.
Yes.
That would be part of it, yeah.
Okay, so, sir, is that something that would be more open, that if you do have gatherings or parties planned in the near future, at least 30 days out, that you could apply for a special events permit with the city and have it reviewed and go through that entire process, and still knowing that you're cutting music off at 10 p.m.?
That is something that my chapter and my chapter leadership are more than open to.
So staff, with special events permit, does the city send out notification to the neighbors?
It would follow the review process of a director's action.
Okay.
And so those are typically noticed in the paper. And
In the
also,
paper, okay.
and also the conditions do require that the fraternity communicate with their neighbors as well.
Okay, and do you have a list of community members that are nearby? Like, do you have a catalog of people that you can contact if you needed to contact them?
In that case, it's a little bit more informal in the sense of we go from, 200 to 300 feet out of our house on Hathaway and California side, and let them know, or we'll send text messages to our nearby residents and neighbors.
Okay, this is just my train of thought, only because we are here in 24 years for the first time. And so is there any repercussions? Is there anything that we can provide or offer that would not get your license or your use permit revoked? I'm not seeing anything in the conditions that actually state any like if this happens again, what will happen? Like, I'm not seeing any of that. So if there's no like conditions or anything that talks about punishment for this happening again, is there something that we can lock down that states, maybe to my fellow commissioners, that states that, any gatherings, special use permits required, something that can apply to this specifically, because we're here today because of this fraternity specifically and their noise violations?
I would suggest that maybe we ask that question of staff after public comment during our deliberation phase.
Okay.
Would be my recommendation.
All right, that's all I have. Thanks.
Any other questions for the applicant at this time?
Just are you by any chance a business or poli-sci major?
I'm a psychology major with a minor in law and society.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
All right, it seems like that's it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And now we have arrived at public comment time. Madam Clerk, do we have any requests to speak?
I believe Mr. Wexler filled out this public comment card for Chaim Hillel. So sorry, sir. He turned it in on your behalf then. I wanted to make sure we weren't calling the same person up again. Mr. Hillel.
Hi, my name is Chaim Hillel. I'm a local rabbi, been here since 2009 and work primarily with Cal Poly students. Been working with students since 2009, and I have gotten to know this fraternity over the past 15 years. And I just wanted to come speak on their behalf. I think everything Adam said that they do is it's true. They're definitely an asset to the Jewish community at Cal Poly. They volunteer for us on a regular basis. They help. I'd like them to come to services more often. But other than that, I think that I'm also a neighbor. I live down the block from them, and if I can put in a good word for them, I think that we're coming from our Jewish month of high holidays, our Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, where we ask for forgiveness and we plan going forward. And I think what Adam said was very impactful, that accepting the blame, but also planning future and looking to keep creating that the Jewish community that they have created. And I hope you'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other requests to speak?
One more, Chair.
And if you'd like, you can fill that out afterwards too.
Yeah, you can speak first, and yeah. Oh, there we go.
Hi, I'm Kathy Walker. I have a couple things to say. First of all, I want to acknowledge Adam and thank him very much for his recognition of what's been happening in our neighborhood and his apology. As I think you might know, my husband is an EMS helicopter pilot. He works 7 days straight, has 10 hours between his shift, including his commute back and forth to Paso Robles Airport. And it's difficult. Sometimes he's had to call out sick from work because of the fraternity noise. And that's been difficult on our family. Our son has also missed school on Friday morning because he's been kept awake on Thursday nights from fraternity parties. A couple of things I want to clarify. As far as citations go, there were 6 noise citations within 10 months, and 2 were unruly gatherings. There were over 200 people. We could hear it from our house, and we're 500 feet away. After they got the administrative citation in March, they had 4 more. They had weekly parties. They had 3 in May and 1 in June. I know that not all of those are acknowledged, but that's what happened. As far as going back to a question that you asked, there have been use permits that have been, I've kind of become an expert on fraternities because we live in them. I mean, there's 50 illegal fraternities in our neighborhood, so it's become difficult. But there has been use permits revoked, but it was in 1989, so it's been a while. And that was on Foothill at 720 Foothill. Otherwise, I really just wanted to say thank you. And I think that the biggest thing that could happen is for Cal Poly to build a Greek row. It's in the general plan. It's in the land use element that the city work with Cal Poly to build a Greek row on campus. I don't know why nothing's happened because it was written in 2014. So that would solve a lot of these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your correspondence, too. All right, any other requests to speak? Anyone who would like to speak? You can fill out a comment card after you speak if you'd like.
All right, Chair, seeing none?
Seeing none. Okay, we're going to close public comment. And at this time, if the commissioners have any additional questions for staff.
Okay, so Ms. Walker, thanks for your letter and all the documentation that went with it. So there's a number of terms that came up in that letter. I just want to try to, well, first of all, the idea of a Greek row or some kind of a summit to try to work this out between the city, the Greek community, and Cal Poly. And we're having a strategy session later tonight. Is that right? So
we have a goal. We have a goal setting.
Goal
discussion.
setting.
Yeah.
Goal 1. Oh, there's a goal. Because it seems like not everybody's talking to each other, and we're not having enough coordination. And this issue seems to come up frequently. We just dealt with it with a previous fraternity application for a CUP. And so you guys happen to be in the hot seat at the moment, but it's sort of a rotating hot seat because these things keep bubbling up. And so it's part of a larger issue in that whole area, and it's part of the fabric of the city that is not, it's creating friction. And so I think we all need to find a way to step back and address this in a holistic or global fashion. We're not going to get there tonight, but I'm just acknowledging that it's a bigger issue, right? So this business of illegal fraternities, this came up in the previous Lambda Chi Alpha, I think it was, that we reviewed on Foothill. And so staff, can you clarify what that means? I think what's meant by that is there's a designated fraternity house, and just like in tonight's example, there's 280 California, that's the main house, but a lot of your members live in other houses, and those they've been referred to as satellite houses. Is that, I presume that's what's referred to as these illegal fraternities. So do we have any thing to say about what that really means and if that's part of the issue here?
So to clarify, in the city's zoning regulations, we identify fraternities as an organization that hosts events as well. So if you're members of a fraternity and you host events on your property, you are identified as a fraternity and you would need a use permit. However, there may be members that live in different locations and they are permitted to live together, but it's not until that they host events for their fraternity or sorority that they would need a use permit.
Okay, All right, so we're not going to probably sort that all out now, but I just wanted to acknowledge that that appears to be part of the issue here too. And Ms. Walker also referred to, I think it was in her letter, lost letters and so there was a request for copies of correspondence that happened between the city staff and either the applicant or the Cal Poly. Do we know if that really happened, and have we been losing track of correspondence that's part of this deliberation? Do you want me to pull it up in the? It's a pretty long letter here, so I don't know if I'll find it right away. Well, that's sort of an administrative question. I'm hopeful that whatever we do and correspond, we keep copies of, and we're able to make that available to the public so that it's part of the discussion. So, do you know anything about that, Marquis?
I don't know anything specifically, but to your point, that we do have a retention schedule, and it is the expectation that we are retaining city records for a specified amount of time. I don't know what happened with the instance Ms. Walker referred to, but I did want to state we do have a retention schedule.
And that retention schedule, it must be years, not like months or days.
Yeah,
right?
I think at a minimum, it's usually 2 years.
Okay.
Depending on the type of record.
And then there was another global issue that came up, which was we need more enforcement staff. There's not enough code enforcement officers. We've got Steve Sheets. I don't know who else we have, but so can we speak to what that involves, and is there really a staffing shortage to follow up on this? Because this has come up before. The regulations are there, but there's not enough enforcement. So what can we say, if anything, about that? Is it a budget problem? Can we not find the staff, or do we need the staff, or does it need, if this is all, if we need special enforcement just for the Greek community, do we need to find a way to have them help pay for it, perhaps, or whatever?
I can speak to that a little bit. So community development, especially code enforcement, over the last year or so we've never had so many code enforcement cases that the group or division has had to respond to. So we're kind of an all-time high, and we've had discussions about how do you manage the volume. And so priorities have gone to responding and following up with health and safety issues first. And so it's not that we don't think that this is an important issue. It's just with the resources that we have and the priorities of identified as health and safety being the top, that this one sometimes doesn't get the attention that it would need.
Okay, fair enough. So it sounds like that's on the radar, and we recognize that it's an issue, and within our resources, we'll figure out the best we can. There was another issue about sharing addresses for events, and Cal Poly at one point was publishing these and making them available when Greek, you call them social engagements or social events. We used to call them parties when I was in college, but and now Cal Poly no longer shares that information with either residents or the city. Do we know anything more about why that is, and is that an inappropriate withholding of information that would be valuable for the neighborhood? And I know that's a Cal Poly question. And is anybody from Cal Poly in the house tonight? Well, no, that's
Cal Poly administration. Yeah.
Okay.
And if staff doesn't know the answer to that question, that's fine too.
Okay. That's it for my list. And so I think I've probably asked questions that can't be quickly answered, but there we go.
Any other commissioner questions for staff at this time? All right, hearing none, then I guess we will move to the deliberation phase. And, oh, go ahead.
I'd just like to make a comment. I made this comment that the other permitting for the other fraternity that we had recently is we do need a sorority, or excuse me, a fraternity row. Berkeley has one. There's many across the United States of America. So I would encourage discussion during the goal setting session to talk about that. the uses just, it's hard for the uses to be compatible. I mean, it's a very, very difficult situation. That's all there is to it. And separate the uses seems like the best way to do it. The problem is land's so expensive and construction's so expensive, you know, how do we ever afford that? So anyway, that's just a general comment.
Yeah, makes sense. To deliberations, I guess a place to start would be with staff's recommendation. Does anyone have any comments on any of the recommended conditions?
I'm concerned that we're just going to do the same thing. You know, I mean, the conditions, and Eric, you were asking about what's the consequences, and it basically says, well, if you get cited again, then you have to come back here again, and we do this all over again. And so I don't know what.
I was curious about that as well, and I was wondering, I guess, what the legality would be for us to include language that says, if in a 3-year, I'm going to make it up just for argument's sake, right? If in a 3-year period you come before us another 2 times, then you know it is automatically revoked. Like, could we theoretically insert language like that into our recommendation if we wanted to kind of, I guess, strengthen the consequences, or I don't know what to call it. Because I agree. I mean, I was looking at the fines, but if you tell me that $350 a year to host parties, that's a pretty good cost to do business, right? I mean, 100 members, what's that? $3 a person. So,
I mean, providing legal analysis on the fly, what I would say is certainly like the kind of revised condition that we've brought back this time and setting forth a specified number of citations that gets you back before the Planning Commission. I would not see an issue with saying if you receive, I don't know, if whatever hypothetical number, you would be back before Planning Commission with a recommendation for revocation. I think they would still be entitled to due process to be heard in front of you.
Right.
But I would think that's within your purview too.
All right. So we couldn't bake in an administrative revocation, but we could.
Not without an opportunity to be heard because there's a property right at stake.
All right. So I think at best we can review or change the language to say that we're not reviewing its continuation, but reviewing its revocation, essentially. If we still have to have a public hearing and do due process, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's where I'm saying like how, you know, how much thick do we get here?
We've got condition 12 here: failure to comply with any of the above conditions or code requirements or the conduct of the use so as to constitute a violation of federal, state, local law, or to constitute a public nuisance, or so as to cause adverse impacts on the health, safety, or welfare of persons in the vicinity of this use is prohibited and may constitute grounds for the revocation of this permit. Well, it's kind of what we already said, right? And also, you know, we said 3 in the last 12 months, and we've got 3, 4, perhaps 6, depending on how you count them and how they're totaled up. So, and another thing I'll just observe is the student body is a conveyor belt, right? I mean, Adam, that was, you know, very well said, very well spoken, and great intent, and so on. But in 4 years you won't be here, or maybe in 1 or 2 years, and you know, it's a rotating situation, and you're trying to set a culture that is respectful. And everything you said sounded great, but last year it didn't happen, and at some point there's got to be some consequences for this, and word's got to get around, and it doesn't seem like it's happening. And I'm also understanding of what you just said, Commissioner Khan. It's like, it's just, we got oil and vinegar here, and it's a geometry problem and kind of a land use problem, and then this, I'm kind of bouncing around here, but the special events thing, do we get special event requests from any fraternities when they actually are going to have a party? Did that ever happen?
We have had requests for special events in the past. Absolutely.
And like how many per year? Like 1 per year or
less?
Okay, 1 every 5 years?
Something like that.
Okay. I would hazard to say there's more than 1 party every 5 years up at Cal Poly. So the special event tool, which I think that was Commissioner Tolle was trying to use as a way to get our hands around this thing. I don't know how realistic that is. And the transportation plan, and as soon as you get 26 people, that's when you're supposed to have one of these things, right? And it's 3 days. Is there a fee for that too, for applying for a special event? How much is that fee approximately?
I'd have to double check our online, I don't know, Hannah, if you could pull it up.
I believe it's about $2,000 for the director's action.
I'd rather pay the fine. Yeah. So. Okay. Well, it's more than 350. It sounds like. Okay. I've been kind of talking about stuff, so we're deliberating and discussing. I don't have a.
Commissioner Houghton, may I just chime in? To that point, if they were to not seek a special event permit and hold a fraternity gathering or meeting of over 25, that would be a violation of their conditional use permit. So in addition to any potential fines under the municipal code for noise or unruly gathering, there would also be consequences in terms of their use permit and potentially review again by staff or the planning commission. So I point that out, just that it's not simply I'd rather pay the fine. There's an additional consequence for them for violating their use permit.
Okay, and so does that result in the documents that I see? There's one for March 13th, which I presume is from St. Patty's Day from this year, and that's notice to correct code violation, notice of violation. That's a violation of the use permit?
I would defer to Hannah on because some of the recommended conditions you're seeing today are new. So what was previously in their use permit and what would have previously been considered a violation of their use permit, I'll defer to Hannah on that.
That definitely is what it says. It says it right here, right? Okay. And then the next one is on June 19th, use permit violations. So we've had 2 of those, and that's partly why we're sitting here, right? Okay.
If I could just comment on that, I looked at those dates also. Just wondering if I could put some nexus to it. They're both Wednesdays, so I don't think those are actually the date that the incident occurred. I think that the police went out there and they reviewed it, and then they went back to the community development director or somebody, and they got around to writing up the violations. So I don't think the date of that items are the date of the party.
Do we feel like there's good enough coordination between SLO PD and ComDev, community development, that isn't that what you call it? Sorry. That we hear about when there's a noise citation? Does that word make it back to us reliably and expeditiously?
Yes, so generally what happens is our code enforcement staff would communicate with police department and request for, any noise citations that may have been issued over a weekend.
Okay, so we have to call them and say, were there any violations? Is that how it works? They don't call us? The PD doesn't call us?
So as of right now, we don't have a current path of communication other than proactively reaching out.
Okay, that might be something to flag for a future improvement to the communication, at least, so that word gets back, because that's been a consistent theme in these talks that we've had about activities in that neighborhood, that there's not enough enforcement, we don't hear about it. And so, okay. I've been talking for a long time, so I'm going to stop.
I have a concept or an idea to get us through this. I think we all feel the same, as there needs to be some sort of consequence to this. And I don't know if writing in anything in this particular resolution would do any good. I just tell this fraternity that if they come back again, well, we're here, we're going to probably support revoking your permit.
That's what I was thinking as well. So we don't need language.
While noting that they are entitled to a fresh hearing at the time.
Of course.
Their own fresh hearing at the time.
It's,
yes.
Yeah, we're not expressing an opinion right now.
No. We get a full hearing, public comment, the whole shebang. But that we want some teeth in this thing that says.
Isn't that what we're doing right now, though?
Well, I'm just saying it.
Yeah, I agree. And is there anything that we can put in, like, as far as like a probationary period, like, I don't know, just spitballing, but like in the next 12 months, there cannot be another noise violation, or the use permit will come back before us with a recommendation of denial, or just straight up, if it happens again, a recommendation of denial. I think that that's a good idea, and I think it's we're at a good position to set a precedent, considering this is the first time that it's happened in over 20 years. Because we're just going to be right back here talking about this all over again without any real repercussions. And I think, again, I think it's a good opportunity to set a precedent for future in other fraternities, that if you are going to have to come in here for a use permit re-review over multiple noise violations or other violations, that you're going to have one more opportunity until, for example, on a probationary period, just as hypothetical, or else what Marky said, we'd come back with a recommendation for denial and still have their public hearing. I think the conditions should be beefed up.
So taking that and also taking what we heard from the city attorney, there is no, because property rights are at stake, you can't have an automatic process, but they're entitled to a hearing. But could it come with I'm interested in the idea of a probationary period where perhaps there's a higher standard in the first year after renewal of this permit or something like that? Is that possible?
I would say it seems like the way the condition is worded, they're always in a probationary period. They get three, if they have 3 violations, and it's not just noise, it's any of the conditions. So there's different, I guess there could be some different weights here of like how bad a violation is and what type that would be under consideration by the Planning Commission. So I'm not sure, I'm a little concerned about predisposing a recommendation from staff when we don't really know the nature of the violation yet or what it could possibly be. So that's just a consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Can I, oh, sorry, you're still speaking.
So if let me just make sure I got this right. So if there's another noise violation, let's say in March for St. Patrick's Day, what will happen then to their use permit? Will they come back in here if there's another noise violation, or like what happens next?
Well, there's going to be a complaint.
So
the PD will roll.
Okay, so there'll be a
citation.
So there'll be a complaint and a citation, then they'll be right back here, sitting right there with a re-review. Am I wrong?
No.
Oh, 3.
There would need to be, under the new condition that's
Okay.
being recommended, there would need to be 3 citations within any 12-month period.
So again, that means they can, I'm just looking out for the neighbors as well. So that means they can, in theory, have 3 violations until they come back in here. But if they're in here now, because of noise violations, they're just getting another 3 opportunities. Unless I got it wrong, with $50 fines. Like, I don't see, there's no repercussion. Okay, yeah.
No, I think you're correct. So originally, when we took this prior use permit before the Planning Commission, we had wording that was any violation of the use permit brings you back to the Planning Commission. That use permit was appealed to City Council, and there was further discussion about these 3 violations within a 12-month period. So that's where the City Council landed in their decision-making on approving that use permit. And so we simply took that direction and replicated it in this use permit. If the commission feels or believes that it should be at any point, any condition is violated, you can make that adjustment and we can bring it back.
I'm looking at condition 12, which is the one that I read. Doesn't that imply that it says failure to comply with any of the above conditions may constitute grounds for revocation? So doesn't that give us a hammer?
Only those that rise to the level of a public nuisance, it looks like.
Is that a different standard? Or to cause adverse impacts on the health, safety, or welfare of persons in the vicinity of the use. That seems like a 1 strike you're out, or 1 strike you may be out.
Yes.
Am I reading that right?
So to clarify, again, it would need to be a public nuisance or create some sort of adverse impacts for specifically health, safety, and welfare. So for example, if they received a citation for leaving trash bins out, that may be that may be something that is a citation, but may not rise to the level of being egregious and coming back to the Planning Commission for a re-review.
Do we have a good standard for adverse impacts on health, safety, or welfare of persons in the vicinity of the use?
I don't have a
That seems like it's a
specific-
bit of a subjective thing, right? I mean, I'm remembering the roof collapse, right? That happened when, do you guys remember that? That's definitely adverse, and that's health, safety. But does it have to be something like that? I'm just wondering how strong of a condition that is. Public nuisance, there's an actual legal definition for that. Is that right, Marky?
I'm pulling up our code right now. There are certain, if I'm recalling correctly, there are certain violations of our code that constitute a public nuisance. So I don't know what those are off the top of my head,
Okay.
but in thinking through what you're saying, there may be situations in which there's a certain conduct that violates a specific provision of our code, and that violation constitutes a public nuisance. But
Okay.
I'll confirm.
Well, it could be like releasing toxic fumes or something, or I don't know. Spilling a lot of beer. I don't know. Well, okay.
So there are some standards that it result in basically instant for the permit, but we don't know precisely what those are tonight. Do I have that correct? That there is some level of infraction that could...
Yes, there are certain things in the code that are designated as public nuisances. So my guess is with that condition, what is meant by that is if these, certain activities occur that are designated in our code as public nuisances, that one thing alone could bring them back to Planning Commission for re-review. But all of the code sections that say something is a public nuisance, I don't have identified. If there's a specific type of conduct you're concerned about, I'm happy to look that up.
Is a noise violation a public nuisance?
I will look. I will also look with unruly gatherings.
While she's looking that up, any other questions or comments or proposals for a direction? Go ahead.
Bob, how are you feeling about this? What do you?
I'm going to say one or two things. The difficulty I think we're getting ourselves into is, as a planning commission, we're about planning. There's a few places where we're asked to make a judgment or findings, and the staff has made a lot of adjustments with the newer elements in the zoning ordinance and the municipal code to give us a chance to do that. So it seems like we do have an opportunity with the planning that we're supposed to be doing and starting tonight, that will have to be done quickly, to recommend, Cal Poly and the city and neighbors and fraternities actually work together to, among other things, I'd say propose, I don't know how we'd put it, but like propose funding sources to pay for the enforcement and the education that's necessary. Try to find a new way through this. That's a planning thing. And I think as a planning commission, these are the kinds of things we ought to focus on, not get into the weeds too much on, in a sense, legislation. That's what the council does, and so it strikes me that we may just go around in circles and not feel satisfied. It may be better to let this resolution pass and work it through and see how it plays out, and then otherwise push back to the council. I think another thing is that if there's some commission or council or organization that's developed by the city with Cal Poly to kind of look at these things, they ought to look at a fraternity row. I know exactly how it works at Berkeley. I worked at Berkeley, and it works really well, and it separates things from the neighbors. Everybody knows what's going on. It's the way it ought to go here. And I think over time, it would free up the neighborhoods from being overrun at times. And I think that's really important. And we've got a livability kind of thing. we've got that item in the planning stages coming up in the next agenda item. So I'm just worried we will just run around in circles and end up chasing our tails without being able to come up with something that we really feel is going to work. I'd like to see something that works too, but I'm just not sure we're the panel that's going to get that done right now tonight, unless we focus on goals.
I just had a follow-up clarification on, I think, the question around condition number 12. I think what this does is it sets the stage of what could constitute grounds for revocation, right? So looking at public nuisance, health, safety, welfare, that does include noise, vibration, and those types of activities. So if there was 3, let's say, violations, let's say they were all noise, or one of them was noise, that triggered a re-review by the Planning Commission, this is just setting up that could constitute grounds for the Planning Commission to revoke the permit.
Well, it's right there, failure to comply with any of the above conditions. And then everything else is or this, or that, or that, or that, right? So, and that's what we are looking at right now, is failure to comply with condition 2.
Just going to say that Commissioner Jorgensen's comments, I think, were well timed. And I think I tend to agree that, I think that the degree to which we are going around and around on this is a reflection of what Commissioner Kahn said. This is a difficult and possibly impossible to perfectly solve problem, but we are trying to solve this. But getting back to Commissioner Jorgensen's comments, I think that we're probably better served and, giving away how I'll vote here, I'm inclined to go along with staff's recommendation in this case and then try to pursue a higher level planning goal in our next process. So thank you for that.
So I have some thoughts, but I'll start with a suggestion that I have, because well-timed comments by Commissioner Jorgensen about, like, how should we approach this, right? Are we going to be able to legislate our way out of future violations? Probably not, right? There's no real way to kind of do that. Also, I don't think we want to be doing that necessarily, right? Just waving the stick around all the time. So I was wondering if maybe, and the other thing that I've been trying to keep in mind is, how do we maintain some sort of consistency? We just did a review recently of another fraternity and their CUP, so how do we make sure that we do the right thing here without introducing all sorts of new ideas, right? How can we create some sort of consistency? The 3 strikes and you're up for review policy, I think, is good and effective. We can argue, how often they've been violated versus how often they should have been fined or, noticed, et cetera. But I think that's a good rule. So maybe there's a way for us to establish a scale where, the first 3 you get a review, but now you're on some sort of probation, right? Where now it doesn't take another 3, it takes you maybe 2 for the next review, or just 1 until you can clear a 12-month period without having a planning commission review. But we could kind of keep that 3 strikes and you're, on the hot seat consistency across the board with other CUPs that we have, while introducing kind of additional expectations for potential involved parties, I guess. So I was just wondering, and that might be a way for us to plan for a more stringent review. And maybe, that second review includes a thorough accounting of all of the citations that Address has received over the last X number of years, so we can have a very clear picture as to, what did take place there, right? So that was kind of my suggestion. I do have a couple other thoughts that I'll throw out there before we do our vote and all stuff, but I wonder if anybody had any follow-ups to that.
I think that what you're proposing is a future framework to consistently evaluate these things. And my suggestion would be, again, stealing from Commissioner Jorgensen, that this isn't the right place to do that on the fly right now, but to make it a goal, to make it a more future-looking plan might be the place to do that.
Okay. That makes sense to me as well. In that case, I'm prepared to make a motion and offer my final thoughts if the rest of the day is ready for that as well.
Yeah, I think we'd entertain a motion if you're ready to go.
Great. I'll start by, I want to thank Alpha Epsilon for coming out tonight, and I commend you for owning up to your past behavior. I want to also commend you for all the activities that you mentioned that you do in the community. You have clearly shown to us that you are that you all are value-adding members to this community, and I think we appreciate that. But I hope that you're walking away from this hearing tonight understanding the disproportionate effect of one negative event compared to all the positive ones that you've noted, right? Your rabbi's here to say, you know, you guys have good character and that you're doing good things. Some of us, I went to Cal Poly, I went to some parties, never at Alpha Epsilon, but I'm not going to hold that to you guys. So I get it, you know, it's the age to do these things. Cal Poly's learned by doing. You know, you guys did a couple of bad choices. You're learning your lessons. Hopefully, we don't see you for a while. And I also hope that you listen carefully to the words of your neighbor who expressed concern for her personal situation at home and for the well-being of her child and her partner without offering a single real criticism of you all, just her own concern. So we do have an oil and vinegar situation. I happen to think that those make for a pretty tasty dressing when you use them properly. So I do think there's a way forward. We're not going to get a fraternity row tomorrow, so I don't think that's, you know, we can waste all the energy we want in that discussion, but what can we do today? I think we can encourage you to continue to be good stewards in your neighborhood, to be proactive with your approaches to your gatherings. I know that the 25 rule is going to be hard to meet. I don't know if you guys want to do a silent disco after 10 or whatever, but you know, I'm sure you can get creative and you can continue to be a positive neighbor. And I'm hoping that your neighbors will understand also your situation and that part of being young is being a little dumb and that they can, you know, continue to be flexible and make space for you all. So with that in mind, I would make a motion to adopt a resolution that city staff has with the modified language for the CUP. Sorry.
I think we also had a correction of a typo in condition 13, right? So with that addition as
Yes, so including that correction for the typo as well. So my motion would include all that. Yes.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second or other comments?
I have other comment. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the applicant's aware that if another new violation occurs, you're going to be right back in here, and we're going to have to do this all over again. And you know, I get it. I understand frat life, but like you're in a neighborhood, you're not on a Greek row. That's what's before us today. So I just want to make that clear because I feel like the conditions aren't that strict as far as repercussions are concerned. So the only thing that we can lean on is that you will be back here if it happens again. That's all.
Go ahead.
So I feel that if we adopt the resolution as proposed with the conditions as proposed, that we are just kicking the can down the road. And we're saying, well, if you do it 3 more times, then this time we really mean it. So I don't think it's appropriate to adopt. I'm not going to vote for it. And I would actually, I don't know how it works. I've never done this before, but I would actually move to revoke.
Okay, so you don't want to introduce any like changes to my motion, but you would just rather go with your own separate motion if mine fails? Is that what
well, procedurally, we have a motion. We will see if we get a second.
We don't have a second yet, but if mine dies, we could consider your motion to dismiss?
So do I make a motion while there's a motion and no second? I've never gotten this far.
I think we need to see if there's a second, and if there's a second, we take a roll call. If it fails, then you can make a new motion.
Okay.
I believe
Understood.
I'll second the motion. I'm not sure how but I think I think the discussion is going to be better.
Okay, so we do have a motion and a second to approve staff's recommendation as amended. Any further discussion?
With the typo edit.
Right, as amended. Any further discussion on that motion? All right, without any further discussion, may we have a roll call?
Commissioner Munoz Morris,
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Khan,
Yes.
Commissioner Tully,
No.
Commissioner or Vice Chair Houghton,
No.
Chair Cooley.
Yes.
The motion passes 4-2.
Thank you very much, and wanted to thank the members of the fraternity and also the neighbors for your attendance. I think you could tell this is something we did wrestle with, so thank you for coming out. All right. That moves us to item 5 on the agenda, comment and discussion. Would Deputy Community Development Director Tyler Corey please present the Planning Commission goal setting for the 25-27 financial plan?
All right. Well, thank you, Chair. Members of the commission, give me 1 second here. I'm going to pull up.
And we may want to give members of the audience who do not want to stick around for this the opportunity to leave if they so choose. You're welcome to stay, but you don't have to.
Great. So, yeah, this is an opportunity. So every couple years we get to come before the Planning Commission and talk about goals for the next financial plan. So we're just starting our budget cycle now, and we'll be visiting, community development's been visiting with all the other advisory bodies that we are liaison to, so ARC, CHC, to get, and tree committee to get their input on their priorities. And what happens is those priorities get forward to City Council for consideration along with the community input that's going to happen over the next couple months. And then they eventually land on kind of the priorities and major city goals. So just kind of as a reminder, the slides that I just have the slides of what the Planning Commission recommended, but before we get to the next slide, I'll just touch on the kind of major city goals currently in the city that are in place, just as a starting point. So currently we have the climate action, open space, and sustainable transportation goal. We also have diversity, equity, and inclusion, economic resiliency, cultural vitality, and fiscal sustainability, and then housing and homelessness. So those are the 4 that we've been focused on over the last year and a half. We'll be continuing to complete a lot of work program items over the next 6 months to finish out the fiscal year. Especially with community development, I mean, our main focus is the housing and homeless major city goal. That's where most of our work program tasks came from. Happy to report that we have completed almost every one of our work program items that we committed to do. Some will carry into the next financial plan, and I'll touch on that in a minute. And there are a couple that, you know, depending on funding and priority level by the City Council, may get additional resources to continue the work on those as well. So with that, I probably would like to maybe go to the next slide. Thank you, Megan. And just look at, like, what did we say in the last financial plan? So we actually had 4 goals coming from the Planning Commission that were forwarded on. So 1 was housing, 2 is sustainability, and we can leave this up here for a minute. Have you all take a quick look at this. And I think these were covered in the, also referenced in the staff report. And then if we go to the next slide, we have our other final 2, which are multimodal circulation and livability. And so that's kind of our starting point. Are these still valid? Do we want to remove, add, adjust? And I did just want to highlight on, I think, one more slide here, and then we can come back. There were several work program items, just for your kind of reference, that will need additional resources to continue into the next financial plan. So the Margarita area specific plan update, just as a quick refresher, is a look at additional density opportunities in that specific plan, especially mixed use, to see really gain additional capacity for the city as we look to the next housing element and RENA that'll be coming in the next couple years. We need additional funding to kind of complete that work, and we'll be looking to see if that's a priority for council given where we're at that time. Historic resources update, we have the funding for that. It's ongoing. It'll continue into the next financial plan for community development, as well as the Upper Monterey area plan. We're going to be starting some additional outreach over the next couple months to confirm the scope of kind of what the priorities are for the area plan, making sure business owners, folks that live there, tenants, have either agree on what was previously identified, or do we need to adjust that? And then is there funding available to actually work on that plan in the next financial plan? So that's just kind of an overview. Happy to answer any specific questions on current work program items, but otherwise kind of open it up to the commission to kind of think about and deliberate on maybe the goals that we already have.
And putting you on the spot briefly, how would you assess the current state of the Upper Monterey area plan? How far along are we? What remains to be done for that?
So there's no area plan. So there's a statement about what the plan should be, and that's what we're engaging with the community on, is to say, is this still accurate? Does, with all the housing focus, initiatives that we've been looking at and other priorities with economic development, like, does this statement that we're going to embark on scope of work for the area plan still sound accurate? So that's where we're at. And then if we'll get that update, and then if it's a high enough priority and the council wants to see this, then we'll move that forward in the next financial plan.
What about Broad Street area plan? We do have an area plan for that, right?
We do have an area plan for Broad Street. That is, I believe, a little over 20 years probably now old. Another area of the city that, I think that plan would be worth taking another look at and kind of going through that process and kind of updating that as well.
I would nominate that for elevation in the stack. Every time I go out there, it feels like a freeway and it feels dangerous. And I know we have the Hawk signal there now. We just have reviewed the cannabis operation on Broad Street, and that issue came up at that time. And I know that we've been making great progress with traffic calming and in lane reduction and speed reduction. And so we've got a huge right-of-way there, and so it seems like there's a lot of possibility.
Yes, Commissioner Jorgensen.
I just had a quick procedural question. Are we likely to meet again as a board before the end of the year?
That's a good question. Yes, right now we do have an item that we would be likely bringing forward in December. I believe it's December 11th. And so that item is dependent on moving forward through the ARC on Monday the 18th, coming up next week. So if the ARC gives that project that's going before them a positive recommendation, it should be on track to be here in December.
So if that were to occur in that progression, then we would have another chance to, for instance, we could throw out some ideas like Dave's, which is a great idea, I think. And staff would have time to come back with a document that has all these, and I don't know about order or how we do it, but we'd have one shot again at it.
Sure.
And if we don't meet again, then this is the only chance we have to speak about it, and staff will write up something which we might see after the fact, or how does it work from here?
I mean, we could meet again regardless. So even if that item does not move forward, we can still have a meeting and have this discussion on the 11th.
We can do that? You mean we could do planning for the... I see. Okay, good. I appreciate that, because I sense we're going to have some good ideas.
I was wondering if you could move back to the 23-25 goals and keep those up there. That might be helpful for us. I guess maybe the first question, maybe a place to start is, I think the way you phrased it was, are these still valid? And do we think that these continue to be the goals?
comment on that. I read all these very carefully, and I have found number 2 is pretty much legislated through the state and local ordinances, and I don't know that 2 is needed. Not that I don't agree with the thought of it, but we pretty much have all those standards in place, and I hear about it all the time in this city and in the state of California.
Yeah, that's part of the area that I operate in as an engineer and building systems engineer, and there is a lot going on. I don't know to what extent the city is a proponent or a passenger on that train, and maybe it's a little bit of both. We also have the 3C REN, which is administered by the county. That's the Tri-County Renewable Energy Network, and there's a lot going on there with training and so on. So I think it belongs in the goals still, and I wish I knew better what levers the city had to pull. I think when we do review in our building department, I just went through it actually because I'm building a porch in the front of my house, but it was not energy. There was no energy impacts to that. But I'm going through the electrification process right now, and I did pull a permit, and I upgraded my electrical service and went through that, and so I'm participating in that and trying to get some of the rebates and all that. But most of it's not at the city level, you're right.
I think there's still value in keeping it as a goal just to express a principle, right? Even if it is mostly legislative, but yeah, I think it's a good point.
I think there's definitely some overlap between 2, 3, and 4, right? They all talk about VMT and transportation, and maybe that's fine that that there's overlap there. So I think that's a really important one, and one that the city has a lot to deal with, because it's our streets right up until the county line anyway, and we've been making great progress. The Greenway on Choro, North Choro Greenway is tremendous, and so we need more of that, and that's in there.
We did talk considerably at the last item about including something about fraternities and poly and the city, working towards a fraternity row or figuring out how to get along. Maybe we craft something on that front.
We could loop that with Cal Poly in general, because the enrollment's increasing. They are, at the same time, they're trying to bring more housing into the campus, which is great, and that's one of their goals. But some kind of coordination with Cal Poly on that issue and the Greek issue, housing in general, transportation. I teach there, right? So I feel like I take my life into my hands riding that trail, actually going anywhere near Cal Poly because of the scooters, the motorized skateboards and everything. And so there's transit stuff there. And I teach a transportation class, so I have my students involved in some of that too. But some kind of integration with Cal Poly and housing and mobility.
I had the thought that we could grab that number 4, the livability, because it really didn't, what was there really didn't say much about livability, and we could even have a topic, I'm being a little facetious here, but it could be livability and Cal Poly growth, and how around the city we need to deal with that, and certainly creating a commission or a council of some sort with all the partners to try to really move this and push it, I think would be a really good idea. So there may be ways we can really work on
yeah, I think
what's going on with fraternities, and fraternities need to be a part of all of that. But
you could have that under the broad heading of livability, but maybe we shift the focus to be something like relationship between university and community, and something that tries to bring all those different stakeholders together, right?
Yeah, and develop plans for a row. I think it's absolutely overdue, and figure out some funding sources, because everybody's got to have skin in the game. I have to say, the notion that the council should just budget for it and start paying for everything is, to me, not quite the way to start. I'd like to understand more who's really responsible and who's going to govern on the fraternity side, and how's this all going to play out before I'd want to commit any money.
Can we go down that rabbit hole just for a minute? how would that look? Would that be an eminent domain situation? Because where do we have to knock somebody's house down do we have is there any plan for how that would look? Berkeley, I know what you're talking about. I went to Cal, right? And so it's great, but it's been there for 100 years or whatever. And so I just, anyway.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah.
You'd have to take a long view for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think at this stage, we're just talking about making goals. I don't know that we try to figure out all that. You know, it's just to make it a goal, let people get together and start figuring out how you make it happen.
I just asked the question just in case somebody in here
has an idea,
could come up. Oh yeah, it was discussed. It's 5 years ago, and there's sort of a blueprint there, and it would be over on this street and that street, and there's 17 houses that we'd have to buy at, you know. But it sounds like we don't have that.
They're all going to be out by the airport.
Oh.
Yeah, no, that's not.
But yeah, they're all going to drive trucks to Cal Poly.
Right. But I think that maybe you're right, though, that maybe we can set as a goal establishing some sort of framework for discussion. We don't have to solve those problems in the goal.
Right. I certainly think that, you know, Cal Poly, I don't know how much land is spoken for at Cal Poly, but I think on campus would be a great idea. They've been sticking a bunch of housing on there. So, because going into a neighborhood and trying to insert a fraternity or a sorority, I think is tougher than just saying, all right, here's an open piece of land. As someone develops a new fraternity or a new sorority, they want to build a new house, they build it here. My wife was a member of Alpha Chi Omega, and I actually was this engineer, and we built a house for her and the sorority up by Cal Poly in the 80s, mid-80s. So they do build new houses.
Are we throwing out a kind of brainstorming? Because I've got two other topics.
Yeah, I think brainstorming is helpful. I'm going to re-review this tape, and I think my goal would be to try to get some of the main themes that I'm hearing, and then maybe come back with some adjustments to what we have, or just combining and rewriting certain things just to see if it's somewhat getting close to what you're thinking.
Okay, so planning. I would say the airport. There's going to be stuff happening at the airport. There's already been a lot of increased flights. There's going to be I don't know if you guys know, but they're moving a taxiway over. It's going to be a lot of construction, and it's going to be a lot of FAA money, and it's going to allow more planes, more larger planes to come into SLO. Parking's an issue out there. Noise is an issue out there. The developments that are happening around there, Avila Ranch and so on, are in flight path and in the noise areas. So I would just throw that out there. And then the other one that I'm aware of is Diablo Canyon. And I sit on the decommissioning engagement panel now. And so we've been talking about spent fuel storage, transport, return of lands to First Nation and the Chumash and so on. And it's more of a county thing, and perhaps the airport thing is too. So, but there's definitely impacts in the city as far as the finances and with employment. There's going to be a lot of employment for decommissioning. How long is the operation going to continue with 1,500 people that are working out there and so on? So I just nominate that as a possible topic for planning consideration, those two.
I might suggest that just see if there's for the chair to see if there's any public comment on this item.
Good point. Do we have any public comment on these discussions?
Yes, Chair. Kathy Walker.
Just a couple of things. On the housing, there is already legislation in place that, one of the items that says provide public information and educational materials that promote construction of ADUs. There's already legislation in place that is mandating that cities have pre-approved or standardized plans available online as of January 1st, 2025. So I see that as a goal, but it already is mandated by legislation. So
that's for ADUs?
Yeah, for ADUs. Yeah, right. And then otherwise, I wanted just to suggest, I know Timmy Tway's not here. I've had extensive conversations with her, and she said that they desperately need a program specifically for handling Greek life in community development. So I just suggest that maybe some funding go toward that, because I think it's going to take a couple of people a while to get a handle on what's going on in our neighborhood. It's not just our neighborhood, by the way. It's spread to Monterey Heights, over neighborhoods north of Foothill, South Tassajara, Ramona, and creeping down into Ann Home. So at some point, it's going to affect a lot more people than just us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I live in Ann Home, and it's not the same as across Santa Rosa, but thanks for that.
Also, we, switching topics a little bit, but we never said a word about homeless the last time, and trying to figure out shelter, tiny homes, trying to make it a much more, a bigger effort. We definitely need a bigger effort. I realize we kind of have to partner with the county usually on these kinds of things, just that it's kind of the nature of the beast and where the funding comes from.
When you say we haven't said a word, do you mean?
In the goals last time, we just talked about workforce housing and affordable housing, but we certainly didn't talk about homeless at all. I think we really desperately need to do that as well.
Yeah, you're right. How about that?
And I guess if we're going to talk about VMT and alternatives to the single occupancy car, we could combine all those into one because they really are in 3 of these goals. So there ought to be some way to do that. I'd still like to keep it front and center.
Can I follow up on something you said earlier, Commissioner Jorgensen? And is it okay for us just to refer to each other by first name, or are we supposed to do the commissioner thing?
I was being a little bit.
I think you can refer to each other however you want.
Okay.
Within the civility guidelines.
I was being a little bit overly formal just for fun, but go for it.
Well, Bob, you commented that we're planning is the name of our commission. But isn't it true that we are a quasi, and this is a question for you, Marky, aren't we a quasi judicial body? Right? So we do pass judgment.
Yeah, yes, it also depends on the action in front of you. You might only have a legislative action in front of you, and then at other times, quasi-judicial actions in front of you.
Okay. So we're kind of a planning and judgment commission. Okay. I just wanted to, when you said that, it kind of hit me like, well, yeah. That's, we kind of have to do both, I guess, so.
So for the ideas we discussed so far, does staff believe they have, sufficient detail to elaborate on these?
Yeah, this has been really helpful, and like I said, I'm going to go back and review this and try to put something together that I think kind of hits the mark with what I'm hearing with the main themes, and some consolidation and adding some language about maybe Mid-High Guerra, looking at some of the issues with Cal Poly and trying to weave that in maybe under the livability goal.
You wouldn't mind, I've been kind of thinking about this item today as preparing for this meeting. If I came up with a couple ideas, I'd shoot you an email or something. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be great too. If you guys, anybody that wants to send any correspondence to me with ideas, I'm happy to try to incorporate that as best I can.
Okay, thank you.
So if we're intending to meet again to discuss this at some point, I see in our script we do have a motion and a second. Are we actually taking any action on this item tonight? How does that work?
I think you can just continue it to that date.
Does anyone have anything else they want to discuss right now, or are we ready to move towards that continuance?
Continue.
Yeah.
All right. I guess I need a motion for that, or is that something?
You got yourself one.
Okay, we have a motion to continue this to.
Should I say to a future date, or should I say, are we saying to December?
I think it would be
11th?
good to say December 11th. It is due on the 13th of December,
well, then in
so
that
I
case,
think
yep.
if we can just make it a certain date, that would be great.
Yeah. All right, so we have a motion on the floor to continue this item to December 11th.
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, with a motion and a second, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Munoz Morris,
Yes.
Commissioner Khan,
Yes.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Yes.
Commissioner Tully,
Yes.
Vice Chair Houghton,
Yes.
Chair Cooley. That motion passes.
In our new informal way, would Tyler provide any additional updates?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Chair. Commissioners, so just kind of recapping, our next regularly scheduled meeting is going to be on December 11th, and right now we are anticipating we're going to see the project that's actually located out on 466 Dana Street, and this is the city's Dana Adobe, and this is the concept of adding 20 very low-income affordable housing units to that site, along with the rehabilitation of the Adobe. So if all goes well next week, that will be moving forward to this commission. And you'll have two recommendations with that, one coming from the Culture Heritage Committee regarding historic resources of a focus, and then you'll have the Architecture Review Commission recommendation on kind of site layout and design. Next regularly scheduled meeting would be in January, and it would be January 22nd. And right now we're anticipating that the rotating overnight safe parking program will be coming forward. So this is currently the city has, I believe, 6 different sites that we're working on. 3 of them are city controlled and 3 of them are faith-based community sites. And so we're looking at bringing that back and reviewing them, basically 6 different sites, kind of I think the concept is one resolution with 6 different sections that talk about each site, because there are going to be site-specific conditions that would apply to differently, I think, to each one. So that would be coming up on the 22nd. And then we also might have, I think I'm going to probably push this item off to February 12th, which would be the zoning regulations update to address recent changes to state law, ADU law, and some other cleanup items.
Question on that. We don't have another meeting in November?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
And on the Dana Adobe item, I know sometimes with our items we get an estimate of time, just so we know with that plus continuing the goals discussion, what kind of length of evening we're looking for. Do we know an anticipated length of time for the Dana Adobe item?
I don't have an anticipated time, but I would say I don't think it would take longer than 90 minutes. I think that would probably be max.
Okay.
It's hard to say, depending on the number of community members that might want to speak on the item.
All right. Any other discussion?
Can I ask about the safe parking measure that's coming along? You said 6 sites. Is the idea that it's sort of an omnibus deal and that we're going to review all 6 in one big slug?
That's the idea.
Okay. I'm just reflecting on how it's gone. We were over 3 on that one. And my thought was that we kind of need to get a base hit before we go for the grand slam. But maybe that's what we need. Walk off? Okay. Oh, man. I'm a Giants fan. It's been a rough year. And can I ask a procedural question? So we had a vote that went 4-2 tonight. If it had turned out 3-3, what happens then?
A tied vote would fail.
Tied vote would fail?
Yep.
And at that point, a new motion could be offered?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
So when you guys are doing your deliberations, the point of you stating the reason you would say no is to try and convince others to vote in your favor.
But only one motion is alive at a time, right? Okay.
All right. Anything else before we move towards adjournment? Seeing no red lights, I will say the regular meeting of November 27th, 2024 will be canceled due to the Thanksgiving holiday. Good idea. The next regular meeting of the Planning Commission is scheduled for December 11th, 2024 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers at City Hall, 990 Palm Street, San Luis Obispo. We are adjourned.